are. Okay, so I know it's wrong. I know these thoughts are not based in reality because my environment is telling me so. But it's still causing me problems, and I don't know how to put my life back together to get back on track. And so this is the tricky part. So let's talk application. So the application of this skill here is really about understanding that now that you're learning to be more mindful, it's time to take a moment to check in with your thoughts. When you notice your mood is low, right? So that means when your body's sending you biofeedback that something's wrong, that your initial impulse is to kind of pause and find out what your thought process is, what's going on in your head when you're upset, depressed, anxious. The moment you notice that in your body, whether that's heart palpitations or sweaty palms or racing thoughts or especially if it's like, causing insomnia and keeping you up at night. Like, okay, what were you just thinking? That should be easier, the less there is going on externally. For me personally, it's usually helpful to stop what I'm doing in the moment and take a deep breath or two. Doing so helps me focus my attention on the present. Are you able to identify your thoughts? Do they feel helpful or unhelpful? Meaning, are they making your situation better? If not, probably need to replace them. Okay, so moving on to the next thing. We want to practice replacing our thoughts with helpful ones, all right? Do you notice your train of thought changing in relation to your new thought? You should. And if so, have you noticed your mood follow? Exploring the evidence for your thoughts is crucial in your mental health journey. Remember the ABCs of CBT we discussed? You will know if your replacement thought is a good choice because it will be accurate, balanced, and complete in its nature. Unhelpful thoughts will fall into one of the unhealthy thought patterns discussed in our previous episode, harmful thinking habits. Okay, so now we move on to the CBT mantra. Catch it, check it, change it, right? So this is what I want you to remember anytime you're distressed, anxious, depressed. Just remember, catch it, check it, change it. Catch it, check it, change it, right? These are the three main steps we need to kind of kick into gear and that kind of muscle memory, kind of behavior, action, response when we're triggered. Okay, so let's talk about the catch it part. The first step in improving your mood is to get faster at catching your unhelpful thoughts. That is why we have been using mood scales or some other method for tracking on paper to build that muscle. It's not something you have to do indefinitely. I would never encourage my clients to, write down track their mood every single day the rest of their life. That's not reasonable and it's not realistic. The whole purpose of doing a mood scale, track your mood and your thoughts, is to build the habit so you can do it in your head, right? So moving on. We are trying to improve our reaction time so that you catch it before it manifests into our mood and subsequent behavior and or speech. Remember also that even though feelings tend to follow our thoughts, feelings are easier to catch and are often our starting place, and then we work backwards to explore what we were thinking when we were triggered. So it goes back to the idea that, okay, our thoughts are fast, our thoughts are sneaky oftentimes and intrusive, and we can't catch our thoughts right away. What we usually can catch is our feelings. So we know what our feelings are. We know when we're feeling angry or mad or sad or anxious, these prime emotions. And so that's usually our tell, and then we have to pause and work backwards and kind of say, oh, what was I just thinking before I felt upset? Okay, well, what was going on? How did I feel about that? Okay, what was I thinking about that? Because we may not even be able to work directly back from our emotions. Oftentimes we have to say, okay, so so-and-so just said that to me. So what did I think about that? What did I say back to that person? Why did I say that? What kind of tape or script was playing in my head? What was I anticipating? What was I scared of? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves to find ground zero with our thoughts. Okay, so that was the check it or catch it part. So now we're going to move on to the check it. Okay, so we talked about being accurate, complete, and balanced, right? So that's where we do the checking part, right? So the inaccurate, we need to find out if this is a false thought. Is the thought false? A usual tell for this would be if the thought is very absolute or rigid or derogatory. If we're trying to find out if a thought is incomplete, we're usually looking for a half-truth. With these, we tend to focus only on a negative, partial assumption and leave pertinent facts out of the equation. Here's an example. A statement like, I failed in my marriage is very different from my marriage failed because my partner and I could not come to terms after they had an affair, right? So one is a half fact, right? Or a very fractional fact. We're leaving out the bigger picture here. So when we're trying to find a more complete thought, we have to kind of paint the whole picture in the words we use. Now, if we're looking to see if a thought is balanced or unbalanced, well, no, because this is an extreme, exaggerated, and global view of the problem, usually in relation to ourselves. An example would say something like, nothing ever goes right for me, right? See, it's an overgeneralization of the problem and a negative skew. The take-home point here is really that if our thoughts are left unchecked and contain any of the facts we just mentioned, any of these factors of being inaccurate, incomplete, or unbalanced, then they are at greater risk of dragging our mood down. All right. So once we find out that our thoughts are unfactual, invalid, we have to figure out how to change it. And as mentioned earlier, once we have identified an unhelpful thought, we have to play it through and replace it with an accurate, balanced, and complete thought that serves us versus the thought that works against us. It is not enough to simply ignore our harmful thoughts, because then there's no actual change in the direction of our thought process. We have to learn to pivot. Okay, so now we have to talk about the practice. So how do we put the skills we just discussed into play, into practice? How do we do our homework, so to speak? So putting this stuff into practice will involve the catch it, check it, change it mantra that we just discussed. Okay, so we start off by listing the triggering event, or in CBT is often what's called the activating event or precipitating event, right? The thing that set us off or started the snowball rolling. Okay, could be an argument with a spouse, could be something very subtly said to you at work, could be somebody cutting you off in traffic. It could be that you started off your day stepping into urine that your cat left on the floor, right? I mean, it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be directed at you intentionally. It could just be that the feeling the universe is working against you, or that you're, got off on the wrong side of the bed, so to speak, as people like to say, to which I say, get back in bed and get off the other side, right? At least that's what I say to myself. If something doesn't quite start right at the beginning of the day, a couple of weeks ago, I got up and our goldfish of umpteen years that I've been trying to save and nurse back to health was floating lifeless, and it was not a great way to start the day, and I had to hit reset after I circled back. I got my coffee and I went outside. It was only 5 or 10 minutes, and the mornings are rushed, getting ready for work and everything, but I made it a point. Go outside, sit in my chair, watch the sun over the mountains, and take in the morning air and do some deep breathing. And it took 5 minutes, but it allowed me to kind of circle back and hit reset and start the day right. And that is so important. And you'll think as a therapist I'd remember this kind of stuff all the time, but I'm human and life happens, and I don't always remember to slow down and start over. But we get to do that. We have a choice. We get to choose at any time, at any point in the day, to hit reset. And you can say that to somebody, and it might seem rude. If somebody said that to me when I was upset, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Hit reset. Do you see what just happened to me? No. But we get to do that with ourselves. And if we learn to show some self-compassion and say, what happened just really sucks. I wish it didn't happen, but it did happen. And the only choice I have is how I respond and where I go from here. And that's it. But that's powerful. That is a superpower that we all have. We can choose how we react to our environment. We don't get to choose what happens to us all the time. Okay? So that's the first step here. Listing the triggering event. The next part is taking note of your feelings in response to the trigger. And we don't want to move past this part too quickly. All right? So taking note of our feelings in response to a trigger means that we really have to think about the range of emotions, because it's not like we're just all mad